Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cole's Leading Through Challenges Conversations. I'm Sunyin Shang. I'm the Executive Director for our Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics. And we started these Cole Leading Through Challenges Conversations because we realized in today's world, we are leading through challenges and we can all use wisdom and advice from those who have aptly led before and are continuing to lead. And so this session is done in partnership with our MBA association at the Fuqua School of Business, with the Duke Business Oriented Woman Student Club, with Duke Student Affairs, Fuqua's Office of Community Engagement and Inclusion, and Duke Baldwin Scholars Program, and the Duke University Masters in Engineering Management Program. And it's my great joy to introduce you to our moderator tonight, Charles Ross. Charles is one of our Cole Leadership Fellows at the Fuqua School of Business, and the Cole Fellows are second-year MBA students with the center who are trained up to serve as mentors and coaches for every single first-year daytime MBA student. So without further ado, Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanyan, for the introduction, and thank you guys all for coming out tonight. It is my great honor to welcome our guest of honor this evening, Admiral Bill Moran. Admiral Moran grew up in New York, not from what he calls the evil empire at West Point. He grew up as the son of two public school teachers and after high school attended the U.S. Naval Academy. Following graduation, he was selected for flight training. He spent the better part of 20 years of his 30-year career flying and operating worldwide. During his time, he commanded an aviation squadron, an air wing, multiple squadrons, and a group, multiple air wings. He spent his last 10 years in D.C., where he oversaw programming and budgeting for every aspect of naval aviation. Then became the head of HR for the Navy, approximately 400,000 strong. He finally transitioned as the number 2 officer in the Navy as vice chief, i.e. the chief operating officer of the Navy. So given Admiral Moran's amazing background, we are excited for his talk on how to manage, lead, and operate in challenging situations. Specifically, he will speak about the importance of trust, balance, and stability in creating a rubric for cultural change. So how this is going to work tonight for this session, Admiral Moran will start off with an introductory conversation that will be around 10 minutes. I have a couple of questions that I will start the conversation with after he speaks. Following that, we'll have an open Q&A session. As Sanyan said, please use the chat function to write in any questions as we go along. I'll be collecting that and we can address that after I go through my couple of questions. So with that, without further ado, the floor is yours, Admiral Moran.
Well, thanks, Charles. I really appreciate the introduction. And Sanyan, thank you for inviting me to participate tonight. I got to tell you, there's nothing better than to pull yourself out of the bubbles we're existing in than to think about how to talk about things that are really important for young men and women who are aspiring to get out and lead in corporate America or in other parts of the fabric of our country. So thanks for this opportunity. Now, I got to tell you, when Charles told me, hey, you got 10 minutes for an opening, I responded to him. I said, hey, Charles, how on earth am I going to say everything I need to say in 10 minutes or less? And he thought about it for a second. He said, Bill, I recommend you speak very slowly. So we're going to do my best to get through this thing in less than 10 minutes, because really at the end of it, or what we need to get to is the Q&A. That's where we really have a good dialogue, and I look forward to that. So I'm going to briefly talk about leading in challenging times, leading in crisis, and then some of the things that I've used, some tools, some rubrics, if you will, that I've put together over time that have worked for me, and they may work for you. They're simple. They're intentionally simple because you can remember them. At least I could. And I'll have a prop tonight. I'll talk about that here in a second. But let me start with, no matter what you choose to do in your next chapter after graduate school and you move on, or if you're already out there in the public arena looking for a place to go. If you want to run something someday, you're going to have to lead. And if you're going to do either of those things or both of them at the same time, there are challenges everywhere. It's not like you have a challenge or a crisis and you get that done with and you can just go off and do what you're trying to do. There will be challenges every single day, frankly. So what you really have to do, for starters, whether you already exist in an organization or a company, is where do I want or where do I need to spend my time? And once you answer that question, you need to then follow it up with where am I spending my time? And then finally, the third step in this process would be, is it working or not? So my prop tonight is an hourglass. It's very simple, of course. It represents time. Where am I spending time? Hopefully you're spending your time thinking about the big picture, which you might consider the top of the hourglass. Or you might think about the principles that reinforce that company or organization, which would be the bottom part. Where many young leaders find themselves, and even older leaders find themselves, is right in the middle of the hourglass, where the sand is running through fast. Time is going by quickly, and you're spending your time on a whole host of things. So one of the challenges of leading any organization when crises happen is you dive right into the middle of the hourglass and try to solve the problem. And that creates all kinds of problems for you in terms of time management. And you also have a tendency to forget about the strategic importance of your company or your organization or your team. And I find that flipping that hourglass and moving it around during the course of the day reminds me to get out of the middle and spend time thinking about the strategic intent and then the operational plan, as we used to say in the Navy, which is, am I following a plan that can lead to success or not? If a leader finds him or herself in the middle of this hourglass on a day-to-day basis, you're probably not leading very well, and crises are going to overcome or are going to overtake you. So how do you get out of that? How do you think about it a little different? I still use this hourglass for the rubric. And to me, if a company or an organization that you just got into or you've been in for a while and now you've found yourself leading it, is not achieving its goals, not achieving success, you need to take a really deep look at the culture in that organization. And this is where this next rubric kind of fits for me. I use 3 words: trust, balance, and stability when I talk about this, and actually how I think through everything from my family life to how I led and to organizational success. Trust is always at the top. No organization on this planet that I've ever been part of or witnessed is successful without trust up and down the organization. So a lot of people tend to think about trust only in one direction, but it works both ways. It has to work both ways. So the goal, the strategic end state for a good culture, is a trusting organization, a trusting team. Then there is this thing called stability at the bottom of the hourglass. Stability is foundational principles, how you operate, what you believe in, what are your assumptions about what a good organization and the practices a good organization or a good company or a good team would look like. And are you practicing those things? So that tends to stabilize your company. And if it's not stable or you don't have good trust, you probably aren't balanced as an organization. And so again, the center of the hourglass this time is not so much the place you don't want to be, but it is a focal point for whether you have both a trusting and a stable organization that allows you to move faster, to make changes, to talk with each other and collaborate as both leaders and followers, and vice versa. And so I would leave you with the hourglass. It was left to me by a mentor of mine 25 years ago, and I've used it ever since in not only, like I said, teaching or talking about it among my teams, but a reminder to myself that whenever a challenge came up or a crisis hit or a major decision had to be made, I quickly turned to trust, balance, and stability as the lens through which I decided whether it made sense. Is it improving trust at every level in the organization? Is it providing stability for the organization so it can operate more freely? It frees up the workforce. And then finally, is there balance across the organization? Is there balance in the work and life balance that we often talk about? Those sorts of things are very easy to grasp if you just think about this little prop that I put up here. So in a nutshell, you are going to have so many opportunities to practice this as you grow up in any organization. Some of you will be thrust right into the middle of a leadership role in a small company or even a larger company, or teams that you are put into, and somebody has high expectations that you're going to be able to deliver results. And what I would encourage you is just think of your own rubric. It doesn't have to be this one, but something simple that you can always go to. I can't tell you the number of times I found myself in a meeting or in a situation where it just, the challenge or the crisis is immediate. It's right in front of you. And right away, my head starts going through this rubric in my own mind, and then I can help articulate that through the rest of my teammates and be able to decide whether this is the right, whether the guidance and the direction we chose to take as a team is the right thing for the larger company, the larger organization. And it's less about me or I. It is all about us and we and the team. So that's a real quick overview of how I have thought about leading in challenging times. And Lord knows we've got plenty of them right now. And if you think about, just take the COVID-19 piece right now. Do we trust government? Do we trust what leadership is telling us? Do we trust the leadership of the healthcare community and scientists? Do we have a stable platform? Are we operating off of all the things we need to deal with COVID? And do we have the balance right in terms of isolation and going after the virus and making sure our economy stays healthy enough that we come out of this on the other side in a better position than we otherwise would? So again, lots of opportunities, lots of places to use this type of rubric in my mind. And again, you'll have to figure out what works best for you. So with that, let's go right to questions. Charles, I know you got a few you want to run by me. And then obviously I look forward to other folks that are participating tonight to ask their questions. Over to you, Charles.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I really enjoyed the hourglass visual. I think that really brought the points to life. Where my question stems is when we're thinking about the stabilization, specifically when you're dealing with teams who come from different viewpoints, ideologies, and backgrounds. Can you give us some insights in different tools and resources you use to just establish that common ground and those principles to be successful as a team?
Yeah, I mean, you framed the question really well. So a stable organization is one that is diverse, that has multiple points of view, that has many people with different experiences and backgrounds that will bring viewpoints to a situation that you are not necessarily dialed in to think of yourself. And I used to talk about it in terms of, we tend to run in this direction as leaders. We're focused, we know where we want to go. And we I wouldn't say we become tunnel vision, but we get very focused. And that's why a lot of leaders that are very focused and and determined will be successful. But what they also need are people coming and ideas coming at them from a perpendicular point of view that are different, that make you pause for a second, go back to the rubric. Is this decision making going to, is it going to take some turn that causes either our customer or our organization, our team, to have difficulty trusting what we're going forward with? Is there a threat to my job? Is there a threat to my income? All of those things start to come up, and trust starts to erode a little bit, and you have to continue to work on that. Are we balanced? Are we stable in these decisions? So any organization, you should try to fill it up with people. If you have the ability, fill it up with people who do not think like you, and are unafraid of asking you hard questions. And as a leader, this takes patience. It takes a listening mode that not a lot of us, especially when you're young, are terribly good at, because we're energized, we want to go, we want to move forward. And you'll find most good leaders, at least the ones with my experience, listen intently to what they're hearing from various viewpoints, and then try to navigate their way towards a position which makes the most sense. Not consensus building. Consensus is nice, but leaders have to make tough choices. But they ought to be informed, and they ought to be informed by multiple diverse points of view.
Definitely. Thank you for that. One other question that I had was, I know you said not to spend so much time in the middle being reactionary to different problems and issues that come up on the day-to-day, but how do you deal with, especially given these times, if you have multiple issues, chaotic moments happening all at once, and how do you prioritize kind of attacking those?
You trust your people. So it goes right back to that part. If your culture of the company isn't trusting, if your employees or your teammates don't believe you've got their back and you trust them, they'll never learn how to grow and make tough decisions themselves. And it's hard. It's hard to what I used to call relinquish control. You got to let it go so that people learn. And if it's a big decision or significantly consequential action that's about to be taken, you'll be involved. You'll just know that. But you can't be in the middle of this hourglass running after every crisis and challenge that comes up. You got to trust your people to do that work. Stay focused on the big stuff, and make sure the strategic direction you want to take that organization is still moving in the direction you want.
Definitely. Thank you. We have a great question from Sanyan about work-life integration. So if we're not well, we would not be able to help those around us as much. What are some practices to stay centered above the fray and stay well?
First, I'd like to respond to Sanyan that this question came a lot, and it came up a lot when I was in the Navy. And I thought about it for quite a long time, and I ultimately came down there to respond with, there's no such thing. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to work hard. In corporate America, in startups, in public organizations, to include the military, successful people work their butts off. And it's really hard to find a balance. What you don't want to have happen is get so far over on one side that there's no acknowledgement of the personal side, whether it's family or whether it's your own health. My release, and it works differently for everybody. My release has always been working out. I'm an athlete, and if I'm not working out, my body and my mind start to have this weird relationship where they don't believe in each other. They don't trust each other. And so you get unhealthy, and you're not operating on all 8 cylinders at that point. And so working out for me was really important. And my staff could tell, my teammates could tell, at either when I was younger or in my last job. I could tell when I was not operating on all 8 cylinders. Some might say it happened more often than not, but it was largely a function of not feeling whole. I didn't have the physical and the mental going with me. And all of us who are athletes and work out know that there's a rush there that comes with a workout that just makes you feel like you've got a lot more energy. It's better than a cup of coffee by any stretch. So I would encourage you to find what that is. Others meditate, others certainly use other forms of physical exertion that doesn't appear to be physical exertion. Yoga is a great one that I learned way too late in my life. I wish I'd learned it a lot earlier. But things, reading, finding solitude and being able to read, finding time in your day to be able to read something that's of interest to you. So find 30 minutes to 45 minutes in a day to just read something that is disconnected perhaps from what your organization's mission is and the direction you're trying to take, but it has a way of reducing stress in your day, and it'll make you more effective leader.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question came in. Could you share an experience you had as a young officer that had an impact on you as a leader today?
Sure. How much time we got? There's hundreds of these examples. One of the ones that hit me the hardest very early, in fact, it was my first or second year in the fleet, as we call it. So after flight training, you end up in the real Navy at that point. Year and a half in, I remember being on duty, which means you kind of have the responsibility of answering phones, making sure mishaps or mishap drills and procedures are done off hours for the most part. So after everybody goes home. And I had a call one night as a young Lieutenant JG, which is like an O2. We had a motorcycle accident. One of our enlisted sailors got into a pretty rough wreck, and so he was not married. Family was a long ways away. In getting the status of his condition, minutes seemed like hours, and at the end of it, the young man passed away. And I think what I learned from that, one was how quickly life can change. When you're young, you're invincible. You feel invincible. You think you're going to be around forever, and it turns out that things can happen in an instant. But I was also I had a collateral duty, as we call them, of being the legal officer, and I had to do the investigation, which led me to reviewing autopsies and not crime scenes, but scene of the accident type of stuff, and trying to figure out, what benefits were owed to the family and all those sorts of things. I wasn't trained to do any of that stuff, but I had to learn on the fly. And what it really taught me was empathy. I didn't even know it at the time. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I was becoming more empathetic because I started thinking about this young man. I started thinking about his family, his parents, and having to tell them, and all of the things that go with it. That stuck with me for stuck with me forever. And so that was an experience that you wouldn't expect if somebody said, what might have had an influence on you early. You wouldn't have expected that. I certainly didn't. But I learned something about myself, and I learned that you need to know your people. You cannot run an organization without truly knowing your people. What I mean by that is knowing their first name, knowing their kids' names, knowing where they're from, knowing their parents, knowing where they grew up. You can do this. It's amazing. Even in an organization back then, the organization was 370 people. I found myself walking around trying to understand more and more about the people I was just passing by in the middle of the day. So anyhow, that's a pretty important one. Probably isn't the one you were expecting, whoever asked that question.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think people being at the center and knowing people is so key, both I'm sure in the Navy and in business. Can you talk about, especially when you think about your experience, like leading HR and managing people, how you give kind of constructive feedback, if you have any tools to really give like effective feedback for people to action on afterwards?
Yeah. My recommendation there is don't be mechanical about it. Be human about it. One of the things that I think most of us learn the longer we are in the business of leading is you have to be willing to confront. And so get comfortable with confronting and get comfortable with criticism. That's easy to say, hard to do. Confronting doesn't mean it shouldn't be a pejorative. It should be viewed as a very positive engagement with someone if you want to change behavior that is more aligned to the culture you're trying to build in that company, in that organization. So you see somebody do something wrong, or you hear them say something they shouldn't have said. Confronting them over that in private is really, really important. Candor is really, really important. My experience has been if I was debriefing somebody on performance at a scheduled time, like quarterly or semi-annually, and I just whistled past the graveyard of the issues that person had, and just kind of moved on because I didn't want to confront the issue, they got nothing out of it. On the other hand, if I confronted the issue with that person, as hard as it was, almost every time they thanked me later because they hadn't heard that kind of feedback before. The other form of feedback has somewhat of a negative connotation to it. Feedbacks also can be very positive, right? Thanking people, patting them on the back, putting your arm around them every now and then. Say, man, you are really doing a great job here, and I appreciate what you're doing for this team and for this company. Keep up the great work. Man, those little moments go miles in an organization. So positive feedback and negative feedback are, to overstate the obvious, really important in any organization. As a leader, though, you've got to get comfortable with confrontation.
Thank you so much for that. I definitely do not think about positive feedback enough. I feel like whenever I talk about feedback, we go to the negative so quickly. So thank you for reminding us of that.
It will also make you feel really good. Yeah, so it's, kind of walk away from it going, wow, I like doing that, and I'm going to do more of that. You can't be fake. You got to be authentic. Don't ever, just do it because somebody told you, hey, you need to give positive feedback every now and then. That's mechanical, and that won't work. It's got to be real, and it has to be for a reason that both you and the individual recognize that they did something special.
Definitely. Thank you. We had another question come in from Jamie on back to diversity within teams, but a different lens to this. So how do you suggest reconciling with non-negotiables? So for example, racism and other types of bigotry being not tolerated within teams?
Well, I think on day one, you have to be really clear that it is non-negotiable. And I think, again, it's going to goes to culture. if you've got any of that in your team or your company or organization when you show up or you're thrust into it, there's not going to be much trust in that organization if any of that exists. So you have to go in. So not only is that rubric work for working and changing the culture to what you like, it also is a great assessment tool. So use it in that regard. So if you find trust is down, and there are many ways to find it, we could spend all night on that. But if it is down, some of these other issues will be revealed, and then you're going to have to deal with them. Confrontation again is never pleasant, and some things are you just can't tolerate, and you're gone if that's the case. Now, there are some organizations where it's very, very difficult to remove people. Very difficult. If you're dealing with unions, if you're dealing with organizations that are structured and you've signed a contract, there's all kinds of legalities there. So it may seem like an easy thing to do to just say, hey, that person's gone. It's going to take a lot more than that. And so it starts with the best you can do to get a personal conversation with the individual that's causing the problem, if you know where that's coming from. Very hard, very difficult, but and some people would tell you don't do it without a lawyer in your presence. It's become that kind of world we're in. Find good counsel that you have a great relationship, a trusting relationship with, and do the best you can with that. But racism in terms of how we've come to learn of it over and over here in the last several months has got to be removed and dealt with in any organization if you're going to have a trusting team. If you want the team to win and be successful, trust is paramount.
She had it definitely. Okay, I think everyone's on mute now. Thank you for that. I really
good enough to read
appreciate it.
the chat, so you'll have to read it for me.
No, I have it covered. So kind of to change gears a little bit, do you have we have a great question from Marty. Do you have any tips on how to improve our ability to relinquish control? So what is your internal compass that you follow to trust individuals that have different viewpoint from yours when you're facing an important decision?
Yeah, I mean, all of this we've talked about is connected. So it kind of goes to, you need to know your people, and you need to know where their strengths and their weaknesses are. And then the situation that develops may involve someone who could deal with that situation, that challenge, that crisis. But they have a weakness in that area that it would be very difficult to perhaps trust them to do it. So you have to assess whether the action or the decision is going to have a catastrophic or significant impact on the company or the organization or the team. If not, then you let them go. You relinquish control, let them go deal with it, knowing that they're probably going to fail. That's okay in certain circumstances. There are other circumstances where you can't fail. Flying airplanes for a living, you can't fail. But there are times when there's enough time built in before the situation or the decision has to be made where you can let people go and learn from the opportunity. And you'll also find out if someone's strength is really their strength by letting them go and you not controlling it. The other way to do this, to kind of buffer and reduce the risk you may feel, and all of us have different levels of risk acceptance and risk tolerance, and it comes with experience. And so the younger you are, the chances are the less likely you will be to want to risk something early on. So you have to learn to develop questions that cause the person to think a little bit about what they're about to do and how they're going about it. But it doesn't come across as I'm controlling the situation as the leader of this group. I'm just asking a couple of questions to help you think through how you're going to go do this, and I'm going to let you go do it. That's another good way to allow yourself to be comfortable with relinquishing control. It ain't easy. None of this is easy. It just, you have to find your opportunities where there's less risk at the start, and then gradually as the situations and the challenges become bigger and there's more risk, you'll find out who can handle it, and you got to let them go.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think also to what you were speaking to earlier is like really knowing your team, I think is like critical in that to have that trust, to just let them do what they have to do. Another question that we had come in, especially given all of like the great leadership insights that you've had, can you talk about just mentors that you had kind of growing up in your career that have really shaped you and shaped your viewpoints?
Yeah, again, it's a long list. And this is going to sound strange to you, but mentors are examples to me. That may not sound strange, but there are good examples and not so good examples. Now, I often learn more from the people that I thought were not doing it right than I did from the people who were doing it right, because it just seemed okay. It just seemed normal. But boy, when it was wrong, you either internalized it and figured out how that I was not going to be part of that, or that's not how I was going to lead, or you became part of the problem. So I consider those bad examples mentors too, because I learned a lot from them. But mentors in the spirit of what we all think about as mentors, which are people who you can go to and ask for their advice and counsel and try to grow based on their own experiences. My only advice to you on this one, to everybody here, is mentors are up and they're down. I've learned just as much from people who were subordinate, way below where I was operating at on many occasions, as much as I did from people who had been there, done that were senior to me. In the Navy, we're structured where you can have an enlisted sailor who, when you're a brand new ensign, JG, lieutenant, 3, 4, 5 years in the Navy, you're working with subordinates who have 20, 25, in some cases 30 years experience. They're gonna mentor you, and you need to allow them to mentor you, because that's part of learning and growing as a leader. So to pick one would be almost impossible for me to do it. But I had a master chief that worked with me. She was my teammate. She's an African-American gal who was phenomenal leader. That just connected with sailors at every level, was able to confront issues like I couldn't. But I learned a lot watching her deal with it in a way that was magical in some cases. And I had so much admiration for her. She was mentoring me by her example every time I was around her. And there are many, many, many others just like her who I learned from over the years and tried to practice the goodness that I saw in what they did over and over and over again.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Especially, I think the importance of looking at, I think we think about mentors so much of our seniors, and being able to really learn from everybody, I think is a really good insight. So I think we have time for one more question. So Jackie Callahan, who will actually be returning to the Navy after Fuqua, she's been getting really involved in some of our diversity and inclusivity initiatives at Fuqua, and is really excited about that. What do you think could be strengthened at the command level, so ships and squadrons, in terms of diversity and inclusion kind of initiatives?
You mean things that Jackie, is it Jackie? I'm sorry. if things
Yeah,
that Jackie could do or what the command could do.
what the command could do.
Well, this is a leadership issue. Make no mistake. And leaders have to listen before they engage their mouths, and it's not easy because when you're given command, it's kind of you have this idea that you know not everything, but you know more than everyone else in many cases, and people are expecting you to lead by commanding. I would try to invert that a little bit to show a great deal of humility, so that you're listening to people, you're taking their input, and you realize that you don't always have the right answer and right solution. You've got to let them run, you relinquish control. All of the things we kind of talked about will be characteristics of a good leader that will only make diversity inclusion more accessible to the command and more natural for the command. If it's forced, it often boomerangs around on you. So, but there are times when it has to be injected into the command as best you can. But in the Navy, as Jackie knows, the command is made up of people that are ordered to that command. It's not like you can pick and choose, but there are plenty of people within that command from all different types of diverse backgrounds and experiences that you just need to make sure as a leader, as a command, that all of those viewpoints are being heard. And again, not looking for consensus. That's often mistaken here in this conversation about, you're never going to be a good leader if all you're trying to do is build consensus. No, just figure out what's important. Figure out where you want to spend your time. Figure out where the command needs to, or organization needs to spend its time, and then pay close attention and get all the viewpoints you possibly can on those priorities that matter most to the command. That's how you are inclusive as a leader, step number one. Step number two is making sure that all of those diverse backgrounds and experiences from multiple ethnic groups, genders, the whole 9 yards you have to understand where your team is at and how they're thinking. And is there trust among all of those people inside that organization? If there's not, then you have to act as a commanding officer in that regard. Hopefully that helps you, Jackie. And feel free to give her my email or anybody there if they want to continue to have a conversation on this. I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Admiral Moran. Jamie actually just sent a chat that I think at the core of everything is trust, and that came across very clearly in what you spoke of today. So I know we're at time. Thank you so much for offering your time today. I feel like I can speak on the behalf of the Duke community and that we really appreciated all the insights and takeaways that you provided. And then I'll just pass it off to Sonia and just to close us out.
Thanks, Charles. It's been great talking to you.
Yep.
Great job.
Thank you so much, Admiral Moran and Charles. Great job on the moderating tonight, and also our participants on really, really good and thought-provoking questions. So let me just make an attempt at a summary. So one is that trust is paramount. And that trust actually is based, I heard two things. One is honesty, and the other one is relationships. And it's being honest with oneself in terms of being able to receive hard feedback and being able to ask oneself those self-reflective questions. And also this idea of developing a personal rubric, a framing from which, whether it's an hourglass or another type of rubric, to be a point of view on the world that you can also share with others so that you can give them a way to decode and interpret you, right? And approach a problem. And the second thing is the relationship with those whom you lead. And that can be upwards as well as downwards and as well as peers. There's no one, it's multi-directional. And that relationship and that trust, again, on the feedback, it's about being honest with them to share both their strengths as well as areas for improvement. And it's also about listening and being empathetic and showing up as a human being and connecting with them as a human being. And finally, there's also a different type of relationship, which is a relationship with the situation, because context is paramount. And the way to really get a handle on that context, what I heard is actually having a plurality and diversity of inputs and perspectives. And that's where the real value of diversity and inclusion and creating a sense of belonging comes in. And if you're able to have all those three things, understanding of how you react yourself, a framework, an understanding of your people, really knowing your people, and there's that trust there, and then understand the context, then you can actually scale by empowering them and relinquishing that control, because you're better able to assess the level of risk. And actually, most times, there is not a high level of risk when you really are able to get a handle on all those three. And so through relinquishing that control is how you can truly develop your people. And by truly developing people, that's how you can really scale you. And so those are some of the key takeaways from this wonderful, wonderful, wise and experience-filled conversation. So thank you so much, Admiral Moran. You are a national treasure, and we're so happy to have you as part of the Duke and the Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics team.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege to be with all of you tonight.
Great. So without further ado, everyone, have a great night.